So we're going to kick off with, this is our little introduction to Maca presentation. Basically, this is us here in a photo on our farm in Peru. So our farm is in the region of Junín, which is 4,000 meters above sea level in the central Andes. So we go every year to Peru to do the harvest and work with our community, and we produce all the products directly with our farmer, here pictured here, Florencio and his wife Iraida. And you can see our products that we make. So these are all made on the farm. So they farm to table, which means that our farmer obviously receives a much better wage for his product than if he was selling into brokers and selling his market through the exporting agents. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about Maca. I'm going to hand you over to Sally. She knows a lot more about Maca than I do. She's got a 2,000 years worth of culture and history and heritage behind her. So she's going to take you guys through the information on how to use and prepare Maca and what it does for us.
Yeah, hello, Marshall's team. So part of our mission is integrate the natural health, especially the Maca medicine, with scientific base. So part of my mission is trying to bring all the ancient knowledge into all the science of Maca. So first, Maca is related with the radish family, so everybody knows radish, but we don't eat Maca as a radish because we believe that has a very special way how to create a medicine in Maca. So in the first chart, you see the fresh Maca root. When we harvest, there is the three main colors of Maca: red, black, and yellow. And then we follow some ancient process. And I'm very... I always talk about this ancient process because nowadays Maca is not being treated or produced in the same way. We dry Maca under the sun during 3 months, so it's a very long time, but it's very important to create the medicine of Maca. And then we have two ways how to consume it or activate the medicinal form of Maca. And the first one is a boiling process, which the dry root is taken into a cooking process. We call technically gelatinized, which means a heat-activated process. And this is very important because raw Maca could create bad symptoms, could be very toxic for people who suffer from liver function or thyroid function, but also can create inflammation in the gut. So traditionally, we never consume raw Maca. We always have to cook. So all our products are cooked, so you don't need to worry about that process. And then in the second one, we have a therapeutic Maca that is a macerate in a natural alcohol. So we do this in our product too, where we pack all the medicinal Maca in a macerated form. So this is a two ways how to consume, depends of the conditions that we want to treat. But always it's important to cook Maca.
So one thing that we do as well here in New Zealand is we have a Maca research program linked with Victoria University, and we're now doing some work as well with Canterbury Uni. And one of the things as a scientist I wanted to look at was this traditional process, because there must be some reason why you would take a radish out of the soil and then sun dry it and then heat it. So we do biochemical mapping where we take samples along this process, and what we can map out is changes in biochemistry, and we can create these biochemical charts which show us what's happening, basically. So we call these biochemical mechanisms. And what we know is that the fresh root contains high levels of glucosinolates, which are the spicy chemicals in the Maca that give us that horseradish kind of burning effect on the mouth and the lips. These things rapidly break down, and we've tracked the breakdown, and we know that some of these key steps, like this one between 2 and 6 here, these molecules, the thiocinates and the benzaldehyde, these things are UV activated. So that ultraviolet radiation is really important. And at 4,000 meters above sea level, the UV levels are extreme. So this drives this reaction and reactivity. And what we see is when that root dehydrates, we start to form these molecules here, number 12. So Macromides, they've been named, and they're only discovered about 8 years ago. The other ones we see sometimes are the macaines. So these molecules here are what we call the quality markers in maca, and also the main medicinal markers as well. Now, the reason why we follow this tradition is because we maximize the levels of these, and we also the formation of the Marcomides is a heat-activated process. So we believe that this is why the Inca always understood to cook their maca before they consumed it. The other reason that you wouldn't eat it raw is because mold loves the skin of the maca, and the mold that grows on maca produces aflatoxins, and these are very, very nasty inflammatory molecules that can cause cancer and create inflammation in the body. So there's no benefit to eating it raw, but there's a lot of risks, and the main risks would be the aflatoxin levels, the mold levels, and also high levels of glucosinolates can be really bad for thyroid as well. So that's why we produce heat-activated maca and why we only sell heat-activated or concentrated macerated maca, because this is in line with the ancient traditions, and the science now substantiates those traditions. So let's talk briefly about how maca works. So I'll let Sally talk about the traditional aspect first, and then we're going to talk about the scientific aspect.
Yeah, I think as all of us working with a natural medicine plant, it's very important to understand also the sacredness from native people and how they used to treat with maca. So we always said the picture that you can see over there is the home of maca. It's a very high altitude in the Andes. It's in the middle of nowhere where we farm maca. And we believe that maca have to deal with a very extreme environment that we have here. And she have to protect against this extreme environment. And this is the way how she, because it's a feminine plant, can build a resilient spirit. So maca grows at 3,500 meters. So the lack of oxygen is half what we have now. So she have to protect and also to develop mechanisms to grow in the lack of oxygen. And then during the day, it's high UV level, so the sun is really strong. During the night, as you can see in the mountains, there is snow, so she have to protect against the freezing and cold. So we said maca, it's a very resilient plant, and she developed mechanisms to protect against that extreme environment. So as native people says, like when we eat this plant with respect and we understand their process, we can get all the resilience, all the strength, endurance, and balance that she deal in her environment, so we as a human can deal with our own environment. And traditionally, if you ask any indigenous people over there, you ask, what is maca? They are going to say maca is the food of the brain. Now, the science proves that maca works in the brain to regulate different functions of our body, like endocrine function, neurological function. So, yeah, this is how maca is viewed from a native from native people. Also, probably you are going to see that maca has three main colors, and the most common is the yellow one that probably you guys have in the store. So the yellow one we harvest is the most neutral and traditional one, so it's more abundant when we harvest maca. And we say that Mother Earth provides the yellow one for everybody, for kids, for men, for women. It's your daily support. It's been used for prevention, so it's my everyday support for different stress level. But then what happens when humans are not in balance? So, well, this amazing plan also is a projection in humans how to create a beautiful balance of internal and external energy, of feminine and masculine. But when I'm talking about masculine or feminine energy, I'm not talking about a gender. It's basically an energetic way how we can consume maca. So the red one represents the feminine essence, all that calming and that nourishing as a human we need to nourish our internal organs like kidneys, reproductive function in men and women, and also circulation that we call internal rivers, also blood flow, increase oxygen in our blood vessel, because remember that Maca deals with a lot of lack of oxygen, so she provides a lot of oxygen to us. And so yeah, it's very has a lot of benefits for women, especially because this is the feminine side of that Maca. In men, for example, acts as anti-inflammatory of prostate function, also regulate anxiety for men and women. So it's that calming effect that red Maca can provide. The black Maca people can consume when they are lacking of energy or mental function. So the black is the masculine side, and the masculine, it's all about physical energy, mental focus. So it's related also with our brain. So protect neurological protection. So because also is the black the masculine side is related with a lot of benefits for men, like sexual function and libido. But women also can take black Maca, especially if we have a lot of physical activity that we have to work, mental activity. So you can see in the benefits of both colors, they represent the, I can say, the yin or the yang. So the black Maca also, because it's related with the brain function, can support people with depression. So you can see there the beautiful balance that this plant can offer. And another question that we always have is if we can combine the three colors. Yes, we can do, especially because we are not one color doesn't fit all. So as a human, we need to create a beautiful balance, and we can consume the three colors. And if we want to treat a specific condition, we can also increase the doses of one single color.
The other thing to note that's really amazing is that this plant, you get the seeds from the rosettas, so it takes a year to grow the root, and then we replant the best 10% of the roots to grow the rosettas, and the rosettas house the seeds, and that's another year. So it's a 2-year production cycle to get our seed crop. Now, when we plant those seeds, if we take seeds from a red Maca and plant them, we still get 3 colors back. If we take from a black, we get 3 colors. So you can't escape the 3-color rule, and 65% is yellow, about 25% is red, and 10% is black. So obviously the red and the black are more rare, they're more sacred, they're more expensive as well, because we get less of them when we do our harvest. We've looked at the colors biochemically, and they've been studied as well in different studies. I'll just let Sally briefly mention as well about the symptoms. Often they treat following symptoms. So here are some symptoms that you would look for if you were looking at adding more red or more black into your diet.
Yeah, some people, sometimes they are not familiar, and you probably know because you see consumers every day. But people, sometimes they are not related with some of the symptoms they can have. Depends of their condition. So we have the red and the black. So the red we always relate. When should I consume red Maca? When I'm related with a lot of exhaustion, with anxiety, so palpitations, lack of oxygen, lack of breath, mood swing, especially for women's, craving sugar, excessive of sweating, pensiveness, excessive of thoughts at night, especially when people, are related with that anxiety problems. Then we have feeling fevery, like tinnitus. We have a lot of people who got benefits taking red Maca for tinnitus.
And also vertigo. Vertigo is another one you would look for with that,
Yeah, and then achy bones or lower back. Another good benefits with the red Maca is that can increase bone density. And then poor sleep. So the red Maca is related with one of these feelings. And then the black Maca, as you can see, is everything related with tiredness, depression, pain, cold, when that lacking of physical energy. Masculine tension, headaches is really good for migraine. 1 or 2 doses of black Maca specifically can alleviate migraines, brain fog, frustration, short temper, muscle weakness, shortness of breath, and joint stiffness. So if you can see, it's when we treat, we talk more about how do you feel, how do you feel, to understand what energy we are lacking or what color we should consume.
And these are good questions to ask your customers too, you know, like tell me your symptoms and see which symptoms they're resonating more with, because that can also help you with some color selection as well. But we'll talk more about treatment in a minute. So what we know biochemically is, yes, the red and yellow and black have very different biochemical profiles and different Macromide profiles as well. And they've been studied in clinical studies. And for example, red maca was the only one that really helped with bone density, helped with male prostate function as well. And it was the best for anxiety and also hormonal balance in women. When we look at black, there were some significant benefits in clinical studies basically with black for memory and cognitive function. Also, black was shown to be very effective for male libido and for male sperm function. Yes, Leanne, we can definitely supply that as a chart because it can give you some good ideas. So we can email that through, that chart on the symptoms. So let's talk about how Maca works from a scientific perspective. And I don't want to spend long on this because I want to talk more about how you would use it in treatment. But the main thing that we know is that these Macromides are fatty acid derivatives unique to maca. There are 19 different structures of Macromide, and they resemble human anandamide. So anandamide is a cannabinoid, a human cannabinoid made in our brain. And anandamide's role is in the endocannabinoid system to help regulate the way that our body and our nervous system and brain responds to external stresses and stimuli. So like I said, I don't want to go into too much detail because we can do a whole nother class on this at some point because this is very interesting stuff. But basically, anandamide works with serotonin. Serotonin carries messages and other neurotransmitters will carry messages around the nervous system. Anandamide provides really good feedback for how those messages are being perceived. And what we call anandamide is basically like an inbuilt thermostat. It enables us to finely tune the electrical and chemical signals of our nervous system to allow us to find a better balance point by actively feeding back how messages are being received. So from having higher levels of anandamide in the brain, we can better tune a lot of the signals, chemical signals coming out of, say, the hypothalamus and pituitary. And this is how we indirectly are working to harmonize the hormonal system, is because anandamide is an adaptogenic molecule that adapts the body to the external stresses. The other thing that anandamide does is it also takes us out of this kind of fight-flight response and puts us in more of a hedonic state of happiness, of bliss, of contentness. And the word itself, ananda, literally means bliss. So anandamide is known as our bliss molecule. Now, how does maca work? Well, the Macromides actually slow the breakdown and reuptake of anandamide through this reuptake pathway where it gets broken down by an enzyme called fatty acid amide hydrolase, or FAAH. So these molecules are being called FAAH inhibitors. And what happens is when we get enough Macromides in the brain for long enough, we start to see our own anandamide levels coming up, being stronger, being more resilient, and that downstream effect will feed into the nervous system, particularly the master gland. So just like Sally said, we see increased resilience, strength, and fortitude to external stresses. So the income people worked this out. They already told us that all of this was going to happen, and they also said she's the food of the brain, which is exactly where most of this activity is happening. So the key thing we look for in maca is the Macromides. Now, we study Macromides at Victoria Uni, and we do this mapping where we use a chromatography techniques to map the Macromides in different samples, whether it's red, yellow, black, raw, cooked, extracted, concentrated, fresh maca. And what we know is that the levels of Macromides are very variable depending on how that maca is processed. But when we follow the tradition, we seem to find that the Macromide levels are higher, and the profiles are different between the different colors as well. So to give you an example, we took a whole load of different macas from around New Zealand that we found in the market. And if you look at them in water, I mean, you can see there's huge differences between color, between texture, different differences between taste. So in this little sample, what we did was we gave them to Sally unlabeled like this, and she had to put them in order of best to worst because she's grown up with Maca. She can tell by the taste if it's a good powder and also the texture. We then took them up to the lab and we measured their total level of Macromides, and they were in the exact same order as which Sally had told us, like this is the best to the worst. So she's a very good chemical detector for Maca. So if you want your Maca tested cheaply, give some to Sally. If you want it done properly, take it for a Macromide analysis, and you can look at the total levels of Macromides. So we had a therapeutic cutoff that we gauge would be an ideal therapeutic value based on the literature, and we found only 2 of the 5 samples we tested were above that, including our sample. So the key thing with these kinds of studies is basically to say that not all Maca is equal. To know if it's a good quality powder, you need to know the traceability of that Maca, how it was prepared, the processes behind it, but also testing the Macromides will tell you. And we put our Macromide analysis on the back as a total percentage by weight, and that's how we create our standard dose. So just a really interesting piece there. If people say, how is this Maca different? You can say, well, it's actually been clinically tested for Macromide values, and Macromides are one of the key therapeutic components, so we know that it's potent.
And it's on the back of our...
And it's on the back of the bag. So that would be a big point of difference as well. We're the only company in New Zealand that does that analysis. So let's talk about our Maca in the last 8 to 10 minutes. What we do is a range of products called activated Maca, which is basically heat treated. So you don't need to cook this. It's already been heat treated, and it's basically gelatinized, which means a high pressure steam. So this means it's safe for your gut. You can put it straight in your smoothie, or if you want, you can cook it again. We have yellow, which is our generic. We blend it also with cacao, which is a bit more of an uplifting blend because cacao obviously has a bit of stimulant in there with some theobromine and things. And then we do these therapeutic blends for men and women. So Sally talked about the colors and the benefits of the colors. Well, the men's blend is a high black blend, so it's got a lot of black Maca in there. But then we also put in a little bit of red because red is good for inflammation, for kidney, for male prostate, and then a bit of yellow. So it's a 3-color blend, but predominantly the sacred colors being the black and the red, but more of the black. And then the women's blend is the 3 colors, but in the alternate ratio where we have high red with black and then a bit of yellow. So you get the best of the 3 colors, and we're taking them in the ratios in which they would traditionally be consumed by men and women. So we always say to people it's good to blend the colors, particularly when you're dealing with more sort of chronic conditions or more, ongoing management. So these are very mild. They're slow in, slow out, but you'd consume them daily in either sort of roughly 1 teaspoon, or we do them in capsules as well, 3 to 5 caps per day. I'll talk about which condition to use which for in a minute. And then beyond that, if you want more activity, you go to your high dose concentrates. So we take the dry root and we concentrate it 10 to 1. So 10 kilo, we get 1 kilo of extract. And that extract is spray dried into a fine powder, which can then be redissolved later on back. So it comes in these jars of powder. We do small jars of 20 grams, which is 8 days of treatment, and then large jars of 65 gram, which is around about 26 to 30 days of treatment. So the pure red and pure black forms, these are much stronger, faster in, faster out. You can use them a lot more acutely and get really quick results. And of course, you can combine the 2 together. So that's the difference between activated Maca and concentrated Maca is basically like the tradition. You're either boiling it or you're macerating it. So we've recreated those here. So neither of them need to be cooked, but you can heat them again if you need to. So let's talk about how we do treatment in the last 5 minutes. Well, on our website, themacaexperts.com, we have all of these conditions listed on the homepage. So I would recommend you familiarizing yourself with each of these so that you can understand which treatment protocol is the best for that customer or that patient that you're dealing with. I'm going to summarize a few of them now just to give you an idea. So we'll go through the main list. So basically, when it comes to menopause, the 2 main treatment options we have are the Maca for women, if it's more of a mild to sort of moderate type of condition. So again, ask about symptom severity, how severe are the hot flushes, how hard is it for them to sleep at night, their moods, those types of things. If it's more moderate to severe, then you go straight to the high dose red every day. So you do 1 teaspoon of red daily, or if it's in the mild to moderate, you'd start with a women's. You can start on the more concentrated form and then transition them down after maybe 1 to 2 months. But ideally, with every treatment plan, you want about 6 to 12 weeks of treatment to get the best benefit. And that's based off what the clinical trials have mentioned. Who have had estrogen-dominant cancers. Very good question, Leanne. So that question I'm addressing in the last slide, but basically we've got a consensus statement about Maca and hormones. Maca is not a phytoestrogen. It doesn't stimulate hormonal production. And the piece that I can send you the reference to is 2 big studies they did internationally showing alleviation of symptoms of menopause, also PMS, independent of hormone. So it shouldn't necessarily stimulate hormonal production, and therefore it should be considered safe for those types of cancers. But I'll show you the piece on that at the end. But yeah, very good question. We get asked that a lot, and women are worried. We have a lot of women, though, who take it, who have had breast cancer, cervical dysplasia, those types of issues, and find that they do get really good benefit from it. So we haven't seen any results where it's affected their hormonal production, just more alleviating symptoms. So think of it more working in the cannabinoid system than being estrogenic or androgenic. So when we look at hormonal imbalances, this is the treatment plan we would approach, and this is what they do in Peru, is they look at the biggest fluctuations in hormonal change. So the Maca for women, you would take it daily, either in powder or capsules. But then the key thing that they will target is the luteal phase, particularly around this drop off here of estrogen around 20 to 22 days, where the estrogen and progesterone both come down. This is where women generally see their biggest changes in hormones and therefore their worst symptoms of PMS. And this is the phase where you can add in concentrated red Maca. So the concentrated red is really about addressing those symptoms right there and then, so helping alleviate the symptoms of PMS on the day or before the day. The women Maca for women is about addressing this issue long-term, ongoing. So it'd be a 2-phase approach, and you'd use this for most hormonal imbalances, also use it for fertility treatment. If they don't have a menstrual cycle, in the case of PCOS, for example, you would start them on Maca for women daily, and then when they start menstruating, you can then add in your red on those days, or they can also symptom manage with red as well. So it doesn't have to be always targeted to luteal time frame, but this is a good time to be introducing it in combination. If we look at fertility treatment, we do the same approach, but the male looking to conceive will take the Maca from men, and he will focus the concentrated black on the pre-ovulation. So he will be basically for 1 to 2 weeks. They've shown that black Maca, concentrated black, increases sperm production normally within 2 days, but the longer the better. So you take the concentrated black to improve sperm production and function leading up to ovulation, and then post-ovulation she will take the concentrated red to help with nourishing the uterus in case of conception. So this is a standard kind of traditional approach to fertility which they would use, and again this is on our website, this map. For male libido and sexual function, we reckon just starting with the Maca for men in powder or capsules. If it's more of a severe sort of issue, then you can add in a combination of Maca for men and the black. So use the black daily or on and off with the Maca for men when symptoms are worse. And then we also have some men that like to use black Maca for sexual performance. So they would use 2 to 3 teaspoons as an acute dose 1 to 2 hours before sexual activity. So this sort of thing is more you would call it like in Peru they call Peruvian Viagra, but you would take it before an encounter to help with acute sexual function. So that's another area in which a lot of men may be interested. Now, when it comes to things like acne, we just say take a blending approach, so using your men's or women's and just taking that daily. It really works best only if it's a hormonal sort of issue that's creating the acne. So you'd obviously want to combine it with other treatments as well. This is an interesting one for prostate function in men. So benign prostate hyperplasia, which is a very big issue in elderly men in particular, and a lot of men won't admit to this as well. So sometimes you've got to ask the right questions. You know, how many times are you urinating at night? We would highly recommend using the concentrated red daily. And this was actually tested against finasteride, which is the current pharmaceutical treatment. And what they found was finasteride reduces prostate size, but it also destroys the production of DHT, and it interferes with testosterone. So a lot of men that go on finasteride for this, their libido just gets instantly squashed, whereas the red marker reduced prostate inflammation equivalent to finasteride, but increased libido as well. So it's working via a different pathway. So for men with any prostate issues, this is the one to go for, is the concentrated red. Also for women with bone density issues, or men as well with bone density issues, so post-menopause, this is the one as well, because it's really good for osteoporosis and also for rheumatoid issues as well. So the concentrated red is specifically used in those two conditions. Anything neurological, you use the concentrated black. So we're talking seizures. We have a lot of people with Parkinson's, MS. What was the other one? Alzheimer's, those types of conditions, brain trauma, migraines, stroke, headaches, memory issues. You use concentrated black, and you'd use that daily as well. But we've had some really good results, and you can read those on our testimonials on our website. Now, for things like metabolic syndrome, so cardiometabolic patients, for thyroid issues, for general stress, fatigue, general hormonal balance, this is where you use the yellow or the chocolate blend. And these ones you take daily for all those types of conditions. Yellow is really good for thyroid, so specifically if it's a thyroid condition, go with the yellow. If you're treating autoimmune or inflammatory conditions or mental health, so anxiety, depression comes under that as well, or bipolar disorder, we take a two-step approach. So this would include, when I say autoimmune or inflammatory, chronic fatigue, fibro, psoriasis, Crohn's, alopecia, rheumatism, you know, like those types of inflammatory autoimmune conditions. You'd start them on a daily blend of men or women, so powder or capsules. And then we look at matching colors to symptoms. So basically for chronic fatigue, the best results we've seen is when, say, for example, a female will take the women's Maca daily, but then she'll look at daily symptoms and say, well, actually today I've got more of the red symptoms, so I'm going to have half or 1 teaspoon of red in the afternoon, having had the Maca for women in the morning. Or if they have a combination, they take half and half of the red and the black, trying to address the symptoms. So it's about doing long-term rebalancing and harmonizing, and then short-term symptom relief and management. So twofold approach. What have we got left? Athletic performance is another one that we see a lot of people wanting that edge when it comes to their sports. So we'd say use the Maca for women, the Maca for men, and then pre-workout use your concentrated black for specific performance. So maybe 1 to 2 teaspoons 1 to 2 hours before your event. And we've seen some great results. We've got one of our athletes that we support won the Taupo Ultra 100-kilometer race recently. I think it was last year, using this combination of approach and using black Maca throughout the race as well. So there's a few examples of different conditions and different treatment plans, and just to show you guys that not one size fits all. So it's really good to be more familiar with the types of conditions that you're looking to treat, and then the way in which you treat. Other things that we get asked and that you'd want to inform the customer as well is to ensure that they're taking their Maca daily, because clinical studies showed that it took at least 4 weeks versus placebo to start to see clinical benefit. When that study was completed after 12 weeks, they noticed about a 4 to 6 week legacy effect. So what we're seeing is that the Macromides particularly are working slowly, so they're very slow in and slow out. So accumulating the dose is the more optimal way to treat than trying to dose too high too fast. So going for long-term plans of 6 to 12 weeks or beyond is ideal. Particularly with hormonal imbalances, you know, it could be 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months. Maca for a child with ADHD, yep. So we've got one here about it is safe for kids. In under prepubescent children, you would use just yellow maca. So the chocolate maca is great for kids, really good for brain development. We've had a few great results of kids that we were told they had to go on Ritalin by their doctors, and their mums decided to try maca and found that good improvements in behavior, cognition, memory, concentration, and things. And in Peru, it's always given to kids before school to help with their brain development. So, yep, safe for kids. It's best in the morning. People will ask that. The red one, I reckon you can have red more in the afternoon and evening because it's more calming, good for sleep, but generally best in the morning. And keep it stored at room temperature. You don't need to refrigerate it. Just make sure it's sealed. It does love to absorb moisture. The concentrated ones have to be really well sealed in the jars because they will turn to caramel with a little bit of moisture. You don't need to cook our maca. It's pre-cooked, but you can heat it more if you want. It's safe for kids, safe in breastfeeding, and there's a consensus piece on that on the website. So if you go to the page on the macaexperts.com, Taking Maca, you can read all of these consensus pieces. And there's a piece on pregnancy too. Obviously, it's never been tested in pregnancy, but basically it's used through pregnancy in Peru. It's a really good source of folate. And we know a lot of women who do use it in pregnancy to help with all sorts of things, particularly post-pregnancy as well for rebalancing hormones. It is safe with thyroid metabolic syndrome patients. So if you read anything on Google about it's a goitrogen, ignore that. That's only if you eat it raw. And there's been no evidence to support that. So it helps with thyroid function. And all our maca is pre-cooked, so there's no issues with that. And there's no contraindications as well with metabolic syndrome. So we have a lot of patients using it on cholesterol meds, blood pressure meds, on thyroxine and thyroid medications, on antidepressants, on antipsychotics. And I would say you take it in complement to what you're currently taking. We've seen a lot of people who have been able to come off antidepressants with maca, which is really exciting. And also the statement piece on that page about estrogen and cancer. So if you go to the macaexperts.com and click on Taking Maca under the maca section, you can read about all of this information, and there's clinical studies behind each of it. So everything on that website, the Maca Experts, is scientifically referenced to specific studies and papers. So we don't make statements unless we can support that statement with a scientific study. So there we go. So I hope that's been useful.